Poverty alleviation. Poverty reduction, poverty relief, or poverty alleviation is a set of measures, both economic and humanitarian, that are intended to permanently lift people out of poverty. Measures, like those promoted by Henry George in his economics classic Progress and Poverty, are those that raise, or are intended to raise, ways of enabling the poor to create wealth for themselves as a conduit of ending poverty forever. But before we begin, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for such amazing and informative videos. This video is brought to you by Feed the Poor Foundation of America. To join or support us from anywhere, visit www.feedthepoor.world. In modern times, various economists within the Georgism movement propose measures like the land value tax to enhance access to the natural world for all. Poverty occurs in both developing countries and developed countries. While poverty is much more widespread in developing countries, both types of countries undertake poverty reduction measures. Poverty has been historically accepted in some parts of the world as inevitable as non-industrialist economies produced very little, while populations grew almost as fast, making wealth scarce. Jeffrey Parker wrote that poverty reduction occurs largely as a result of overall economic growth. Food shortages were common before modern agricultural technology and in places that lack them today, such as nitrogen fertilizers, pesticides and irrigation methods. The dawn of the Industrial Revolution led to high economic growth, eliminating mass poverty in what is now considered the developed world. World GDP per person quintupled during the 20th century. In 1820, 75% of humanity lived on less than $1 a day, while in 2001 only about 20% did. Today, continued economic development is constrained by the lack of economic freedoms. Economic liberalization requires extending property rights to the poor, especially to land. Financial services, notably savings, can be made accessible to the poor through technology, such as mobile banking. 10-11, inefficient institutions, corruption, and political instability can also discourage investment. Aid and government support in health, education, and infrastructure helps growth by increasing human and physical capital. Poverty alleviation also involves improving the living conditions of people who are already poor. Aid, particularly in the medical and scientific areas, is essential in providing better lives, such as the Green Revolution and the eradication of smallpox. Problems with today's development aid include the high proportion of tied aid, which mandates receiving nations to buy products, often more expensive, originating only from donor countries. Nevertheless, some believe, Peter Singer in his book The Life You Can Save, that small changes in the ways people in affluent nations live their lives could solve world poverty. The World Bank Group's goals are to end extreme poverty and promote shared prosperity. This mission underpins our analytical, operational, and convening work in about 140 client countries. For 3 decades, the number of people living in extreme poverty, defined as those who live on less than $2.15 per person per day at 2017 purchasing power parity, was declining. But the trend was interrupted in 2020, when poverty rose due to the disruption caused by the COVID-19 crisis. The number of people in extreme poverty rose by 70 million to more than 700 million people. The global extreme poverty rate reached 9.3%, up from 8.4% in 2019. The world's poorest people bore the steepest costs of the pandemic. Their income losses were twice as high as the world's richest, and global inequality rose for the first time in decades. The poorest also faced large setbacks in health and education which, if left unaddressed by policy action, will have lasting consequences for their lifetime income prospects. The recovery since then has been uneven. Rising food and energy prices, fueled in part by the war in Ukraine and by climate shocks and conflict, have hindered a swift recovery. By the end of 2022, as many as 685 million people could still be living in extreme poverty. The recent setbacks took place when the speed of progress toward poverty reduction was already slowing, in tandem with subdued global economic growth. The recent crises have pushed the world further off track from the global goal of ending extreme poverty by 2030. Given current trends, 574 million people, nearly 7% of the world's population, will still be living on less than $2.15 a day in 2030. And the challenge is made harder by the fact that extreme poverty is concentrated in parts of the world where it will be hardest to eradicate, in sub-Saharan Africa, in conflict-affected areas, and in rural areas. In 2019, an unprecedented 71.4 million people worldwide have been forced from their homes. To compound matters, 85% of 25.1 million refugees globally are hosted in developing countries. 25% live in the least developed countries. Here, refugees and host communities alike often find themselves enduring extreme poverty and scarce economic opportunities. Further, the majority of refugees worldwide live in protracted situations for 5 years or more, making most refugees less suited for emergency relief than for longer-term solutions. With an average of 30 persons being forcibly displaced every minute of every day. Both refugees, nationals and host communities, and host country governments experience increasing social and economic pressure. In addition to new and protracted conflicts, climate change impacts will significantly add to the numbers of the forcibly displaced in coming years. In locations where the level of poverty of refugees and host communities is on par, disparities in access to relief, resources and infrastructure often create pressure on refugees and nationals alike. This in turn puts fiscal and political pressures on hosting governments and social services, particularly in low-income countries. Enabling refugees to work in their host country has received renewed attention in the past years as a way to combine development needs of host communities and countries with the humanitarian needs of refugees. When refugees are able to work, their self-reliance is enhanced, and they are able to provide for themselves and their families, increase resilience, regain dignity, and build independent and meaningful future. Ultimately, access to livelihoods and jobs enables the impoverished to meet their needs for protection, food security, health, housing, and other essential services in a safe, sustainable, and dignified manner. A growing body of evidence suggests that including refugees in local economies contributes to economic growth, and can thus be mutually beneficial for refugees and host communities. Overall, access to work reduces pressure on refugees and hosts locally, contributes to economic growth, and therefore eases pressure on the host country as a whole. In December 2018, the United Nations adopted the Global Compact on Refugees, GCR, in which member states committed to the objectives of reducing pressure on host countries and enhancing refugee self-reliance. This is to be achieved by increased international burden and responsibility sharing, and by mobilizing the international community and stakeholders as a whole. In line with the 2030 Agenda's Sustainable Development Goals, the Compact calls for alleviating poverty, which is itself a significant root cause of large refugee populations. So, if you're interested in learning more facts about helping needy, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get notified by our new videos. Click the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching this video and be part of our global movement. Visit www.worldfeedthepooride.org.